Unmasking the narcissist without raising a single voice. Let's explore the challenging task of unmasking a narcissist. The core truth is simple but hard. This is never easy. The responsibility falls on you, and even then, success is not guaranteed. Yet, in some cases, attempting it can bring profound clarity and restore a sense of sanity that you may have long been missing. Picture this. You are engaged in a conversation with someone who is narcissistic, antagonistic, and manipulative. You are performing all the recommended strategies perfectly. You are not defending yourself, not engaging in arguments, not justifying your actions, and not personalizing their attacks. You are practicing radical acceptance, remaining composed, and even suppressing your own emotional reactions to maintain your inner equilibrium. Yet, narcissists operate like professional prizefighters in arguments. They are relentless and can sustain the psychological pressure for hours, wearing you down through what is essentially a war of attrition. In the first few minutes, or even the first hour, you might feel almost zen-like as they throw irrational and hurtful comments your way. But eventually, the strain accumulates. Perhaps they strike a nerve, provoke you with an outrageous accusation, or attack a deeply held value. Sometimes, it is not even personal. It may simply be their mood that day. This dynamic is particularly pronounced in adult narcissistic relationships and is often amplified in families. People who have spent years navigating these relationships learn your vulnerabilities intuitively. They know where to strike, how to provoke a reaction, and which insecurities to exploit. They may accuse you of things you never did, mock your sensitivities, or portray you as incompetent or overly emotional, even when you are the one holding a family or a workplace together. Narcissists can maintain composure for short bursts, but their true strategy is endurance. They are patient in wearing you down while your attempts to remain disengaged can become exhausting. Resisting the instinct to react, holding back emotions, withholding your immediate responses, is psychologically taxing. Survivors of narcissistic relationships often overregulate, displaying signs of mild dissociation, emotional numbness, helplessness, and other trauma-related responses. Understanding the mechanics of these relationships highlights a painful truth. Emotional restraint is often a form of self-preservation, not weakness. Eventually, most people break. We yell, retaliate, or exchange sharp remarks. But as we escalate, the narcissist often remains calm or even more composed, sometimes speaking in a tone that seems almost designed to diminish us, as if reminding us of our perceived failure. Psychologically, this is manipulative and demoralizing, and it can feel like they have won. From a clinical standpoint, directly confronting or labeling a narcissist rarely works. Calling them out for their behavior or personality traits is likely to escalate the conflict without affecting any real change. The more effective strategy is indirect, to unmask them in ways that others can see, without expecting them to acknowledge it themselves. The goal is not self-satisfaction, but to create conditions where their typical manipulative tactics are neutralized or exposed to a wider audience. One crucial insight for this process is that as long as you are the only person suffering, your warnings about manipulation, emotional abuse, or harm are unlikely to be believed. Other people often need to experience the consequences themselves before recognizing the patterns. Psychologically, this is not about cruelty. It is about creating a reality where the narcissist's actions are visible to others without you having to continuously justify or defend yourself. Solutions from a psychological perspective. Focus on self-regulation first. Building your capacity to remain calm and non-reactive is foundational. Techniques such as mindfulness, controlled breathing, and cognitive restructuring can help maintain composure in the face of provocations. Document patterns objectively. Keep a record of behaviors and incidents in a factual, unemotional way. This can help you recognize patterns and, if necessary, share evidence with others without inserting subjective judgment. Shift the audience. Rather than expecting the narcissist to recognize their behavior, create situations where the behavior becomes apparent to others. This could involve setting boundaries or allowing natural consequences to unfold. Protect your psychological boundaries. Radical acceptance is not resignation. It is recognizing the limits of what you can control while preserving your mental health. Psychologists often emphasize that boundaries are the most effective tool in regulating exposure to toxic dynamics. Empower indirect accountability. Allowing the narcissist's behavior to be visible to others establishes accountability without direct confrontation. Over time, this can reduce their manipulative power and protect your emotional well-being. By integrating these approaches, you shift the work from trying to change the narcissist, which is rarely successful, to protecting your own sanity while exposing their patterns in a safe and strategic way. This reframing allows you to regain power and clarity, even in relationships that once felt overwhelmingly manipulative and exhausting. Let's start by diving into the first and perhaps most crucial principle of unmasking a narcissist. Do not take the bait. I cannot stress this enough. Don't engage, don't react, don't validate their provocations. This is not just advice, it is a strategic foundation. The challenge here is profound. Imagine trying to maintain this composure when you are exhausted, stressed, overwhelmed, or simply drained from a conversation that feels endless. It is like attempting to walk 25 miles under a blazing sun. It's grueling, and in some cases, might feel impossible. Psychologically, your mind and body are being taxed beyond normal limits, and you may experience a near-constant state of tension or mental fatigue. Build your internal resilience through mindfulness, breathwork, or grounding techniques before engaging with a narcissistic individual. This prepares your nervous system to stay regulated even under prolonged stress and prevents impulsive reactions that could feed their manipulative games. Here's the reality. If you refuse to engage in the patterns they expect, if you do not take the bait, they will escalate. This is where many people stumble. The narcissist relies on eliciting reactions. Your emotional responses are their fuel. When you cease to feed this fire, insults intensify, anger sharpens, and they actively probe at your vulnerabilities. You must be prepared for this escalation. Your endurance during this phase is what allows for the unmasking to occur. Before confronting or interacting with a narcissist, establish a clear plan for self-regulation. Know your triggers and set an internal script. I will not react. I will observe, not respond. Journaling these strategies in advance can create a mental rehearsal that makes real-life execution more feasible. Once you survive the initial waves of escalation, a subtle shift often occurs. You may begin to sense the narcissist deflating. At this stage, the trauma-bonded instinct to help them may surface. They may start presenting themselves as vulnerable or apologetic, which triggers the fawn response, a psychological urge to soothe or rescue them. Maintain radical acceptance and emotional boundaries. Recognize that their vulnerability is a tactic, not a genuine invitation for reconciliation. Your task is to observe without intervening, to allow the behavioral patterns to reveal themselves without being pulled back into old dynamics. Sometimes, they may apologize, confess, or attempt to come clean. You do not need to confront their claims with disbelief, but you also cannot fall into the trap of assuming the relationship or dynamic has changed. Watch their behavior, not just their words. Healing from narcissistic entanglement requires you to resist retaliatory impulses and, more importantly, the urge to resume old relational patterns where they baited you successfully. Develop a behavioral checklist. Observe consistency over time, not isolated apologies. Track patterns objectively to differentiate performative remorse from genuine behavioral change. Psychologists often recommend separating observed behavior from emotional interpretation to preserve clarity and prevent re-engagement with manipulative tactics. Now, consider the concept of strategic, short-term sacrifices to facilitate unmasking. In some situations, you may need to let the narcissist make decisions that are obviously flawed, spending recklessly, making poor plans, or creating logistical chaos. The key here is detachment. Do not intervene, and do not attempt to fix their errors. They may still blame you later, but by disengaging, you remove the opportunity for them to manipulate the narrative. For example, I once allowed a narcissistic partner to plan an entire trip, knowing it would be chaotic and potentially hazardous. My prior attempts to prevent mistakes had failed, and my careful planning was consistently criticized or reframed as incompetent. By stepping back and letting them take control, the consequences became evident to others around us. They had to justify the outcomes, and those observing could clearly see the flaws in the narcissist's decisions. Witnessing this, I felt the psychological equivalent of watching a balloon slowly deflate. Even when they tried to provoke me with, "I know you want to say I told you so," I remained neutral. I simply acknowledged the reality without feeding the dynamic. Psychologists often suggest natural consequence exposure as a tool for unmasking. Allowing someone to experience the consequences of their choices, without intervention, highlights patterns that are otherwise hidden. It reduces your own cognitive load and shifts accountability away from you. Ultimately, the first steps in unmasking a narcissist involve self-regulation, endurance, and strategic detachment. You will face escalation, manipulation, and emotional provocations. Your task is to hold firm, observe patterns without reacting, and create circumstances where others can witness the narcissistic behavior directly. Through these strategies, you regain a sense of agency, clarity, and psychological safety, even if the narcissist never acknowledges their behavior. I simply said, "I never said anything. It just was what it was." Surprisingly, I wasn't blamed. Yes, the trip was a disaster, even dangerous at times, but the psychological victory was undeniable. It confirmed to me that I wasn't losing my mind. The other people present could see that the chaos wasn't my doing because I had remained completely hands-off. I hadn't attempted to rescue or intervene. Sacrificing comfort, control, and even my own expectations was the cost, but it clarified the reality of the narcissist's behavior to others. In that small way, it acted like a spotlight of unmasking, and I finally felt less crazy, which was the real win. Psychologists' insight: stepping back and allowing the narcissist's poor choices to play out can provide external validation. This is a cognitive strategy to reinforce reality testing. You are no longer solely reliant on your own perception to confirm what is normal or acceptable behavior. The next stage in unmasking a narcissist is achieving indifference. True indifference is the ultimate form of unmasking because it signals that their behavior no longer manipulates or disturbs you. Psychologically, it's like observing a child throwing a tantrum in a restaurant and feeling no embarrassment, no anger, and no need to intervene, simply watching without emotional investment. But cultivating this mindset is challenging, especially if even a shred of compassion for the narcissistic person lingers. Some people cultivate indifference by intentionally filling their lives with purpose, meaningful activities, supportive relationships, or joyful experiences. They reframe the narcissist as a minor irritation, like a persistent bad odor or an occasional ant in the kitchen. Annoying, but not defining your life. Indifference strips away the power of their manipulation because it removes your emotional engagement. Use behavioral activation and life enrichment strategies. Focus on activities, hobbies, or relationships that build intrinsic satisfaction. Engage in reflective journaling or therapy to help reinforce the cognitive reframe of the narcissist as inconsequential in your life's narrative. Once you achieve this state, you will notice the narcissist trying every strategy to regain control. They may escalate in cruelty, soften with charm, attempt hoovering, or even perform apologies and love bombing. The essential anchor for you is radical acceptance, recognizing reality as it is without wishing it were different. Indifference and radical acceptance reinforce each other. They form a psychological armor. When the narcissist's old tactics, domination, baiting, and attempts to provoke emotional responses, no longer work, their control begins to falter. They may accuse you of manipulation, coldness, or giving the silent treatment. But if you are truly indifferent, their accusations lose all impact. You know the truth, and their words carry no weight. This is what it means to be essentially gaslight-proof. Their attempts to distort reality no longer affect your perception or emotional state. Practice cognitive restructuring and mindfulness. Label manipulative behaviors without emotional involvement and remind yourself that their words are reflections of their strategy, not your reality. This helps solidify the psychological detachment required for indifference. The ultimate unmasking often requires allowing the narcissist to dysregulate in front of others. Most people instinctively intervene. They try to protect waitstaff, colleagues, family members, or even themselves from witnessing narcissistic outbursts. Over years, many develop patterns of preemptive protection, attempting to smooth over chaos and preserve appearances. But if you want others to see the truth, you must sometimes let them experience the consequences firsthand. Sit calmly. Resist the urge to rescue or control the situation. Let the narcissist's disruptive behavior unfold while others observe. This may provoke the narcissist to blame you, but that is part of the process. Indifference in these moments is critical because it allows their behavior to be objectively witnessed. Adopt a stance of observational neutrality. Allow the narcissist to experience natural consequences without intervening. This not only unearths their behavior to others but also reinforces your own boundary-setting skills and emotional regulation. Finally, it is sometimes necessary to let other people feel the impact of the narcissist's behavior. Yes, this is difficult, particularly if children or vulnerable individuals are involved. But most people are naturally self-interested. Many will not recognize narcissistic patterns until they experience them directly. By allowing this, you remove yourself as the sole witness and give the broader social context a chance to validate the patterns. Frame this ethically and safely. Allow exposure to consequences within limits that do not cause lasting harm. For example, minor social or logistical mishaps can reveal patterns of irresponsibility or manipulation without putting anyone at serious risk. The goal is observation and validation, not harm. In essence, unmasking a narcissist is not about confrontation. It is about strategic detachment, radical acceptance, indifference, and allowing observable consequences to reveal their true patterns. Psychologically, these methods empower you to reclaim your reality, protect your mental health, and give others the clarity to see the narcissist's behavior objectively. When a narcissistic person realizes that they are no longer eliciting emotional reactions from you, when you are fully disengaged and checked out, they often redirect their energy toward others. This shift can mean that someone else may get hurt in the process, as the narcissist seeks to maintain their usual patterns of manipulation and control. In group dynamics, families, workplaces, friend circles, this strategy can expose their true behavior to the wider system. It's crucial to understand, though, that some people will still be frustrated with you for not stepping in, especially if they've grown accustomed to you acting as a protective buffer. They may resent the sudden responsibility of facing the narcissist's chaos themselves. Psychologists' perspective: accepting that others may be upset is part of setting healthy boundaries. You cannot remain the emotional firefighter for everyone forever. This is about teaching both the narcissist and observers about accountability without sacrificing your own mental health. Here's an essential principle: never label the narcissistic person to others. Words like narcissist, toxic, or gaslighter may feel accurate, but they are increasingly polarizing and overused. Social media has made these terms loaded and even off-putting, and using them can inadvertently cast you as the antagonist rather than the observer. Instead of labeling, focus on describing concrete behaviors and facts about what is happening in the relationship. For example, if someone asks why you're skipping a social event, you can answer with clarity and honesty: "My partner didn't want to go, and I didn't have the energy to argue." If they ask why this person acts the way they do, it's fine to say, "I honestly don't know." You no longer need to be the narcissist's publicist, crisis manager, or explainer of behavior. Reframe your communication to describe actions, not character judgments, and allow others to interpret for themselves. Use behavioral observation language. Stick to objective descriptions rather than subjective labels. This reduces defensiveness in others and helps you maintain emotional neutrality while allowing the narcissist's behavior to reveal itself naturally. Another critical guideline is avoid calling out the narcissist in front of others, whether it's for their personality traits or their actions. Many of us are unconsciously trauma-bonded to narcissists, and there is a societal fascination with labeling people as toxic or manipulative. Attempting to confront them publicly often backfires, prompting enablers or non-believers to defend the narcissist rather than seeing the truth. It's important to realize there is no toxic person by itself. A narcissist will naturally expose their dysfunction if you give them space. You do not need to shine a spotlight on their behavior. They will reveal it through their own actions. Stepping back and allowing their failures to play out without interference is a form of psychological mastery and self-preservation. Psychologists' insight: This is an application of observational learning and delayed reinforcement. By not intervening, you allow the social system and the narcissist themselves to demonstrate the consequences of their behavior, which often leads to internalized recognition among observers and reduces your exposure to ongoing manipulation. It's important to note that even when you employ these strategies, people may still not recognize the narcissistic patterns immediately. In broader systems, corporate hierarchies, political structures, or families, enablers and supporters often remain blind until the negative consequences directly impact them. Even then, they may deflect blame onto others. In extreme cases, legal action, public exposure, or undeniable evidence may be required to unmask the narcissist. However, these situations are rare. Focus on controllable variables, your own reactions, boundaries, and well-being. Accept that perception and recognition by others are outside your control. Radical acceptance combined with indifference creates internal clarity and shields you from the emotional chaos of trying to convince others. For most of us, the process of unmasking a narcissist is gradual and internal. It involves cultivating radical awareness, practicing indifference, resisting the bait even during escalations, and ceasing to act as their crisis manager. People may not believe your accounts, and only those directly affected will recognize the behavior. This is where patience, boundaries, and strategic detachment become your most powerful tools. Ultimately, the mask falls when the narcissist's behavior can no longer manipulate or provoke you, and you are secure enough to let the consequences play out naturally. At that point, you may even find yourself too indifferent to care, which, paradoxically, is the psychological triumph you've been working toward. Psychologists' closing advice: cultivate self-reliance, reinforce personal boundaries, and engage in life-affirming activities outside the narcissist's influence. The combination of radical acceptance, indifference, and mindful observation creates the optimal environment for both your healing and the unmasking of the narcissist in ways that are psychologically safe and sustainable.